very passionate about protecting all that is special, and that makes living in Miami. I'm going to borrow the words from my colleague, Glenna Milberg, who was just on right now with us live at 6 o'clock, who was at the city commission meeting at City Hall in Miami last week, that fateful July 28th. And she described it as a grenade going off when this decision was made. And we're still, I guess, feeling the aftershocks of that grenade. A week later, the idea that the city of Miami is considering a homeless encampment on Virginia Key, next to land that is environmentally sensitive, next to land that has been earmarked for acquisition by Miami-Dade County as part of its EEL program to conserve environmentally endangered land, next to the Bill Sadowski critical wildlife area, next to Mast Academy. There's so many people, so many stakeholders, but I think there are 3 million stakeholders when it comes to Virginia Key, because those of us who are born and raised in Miami have spent time, no doubt, on that land as a kid, growing up, taking our families there, recreating there, getting up close to the manatees and the sharks and the dolphins, stingrays. It means so much to so many people, and that's why we're all here tonight, to see what's going on. And we'd like to thank all of our panelists for being here tonight and helping us dissect this. Tonight's town hall is hosted by Commissioner Raquel Regalado, Miami-Dade Mayor Daniela Levine Cava. We have officials from various departments who are going to be chiming in, and we're all going to take a deep dive into some of these facts that we can dissect and realize what it is that we can bring to the table and how we can fix this problem, and whether or not this is in fact a viable option. So let's get into it. We're going to begin with Madame Mayor, who I know wants to address the issue of homelessness and the housing crisis that we're experiencing here in Miami-Dade County. And this is a big issue, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Louis. Can everybody see me as well as hear me? Hello? Am I visible? Hello. Okay, great. Like this, can you still see me? That's my question. Can you see me?
Yes. You have
okay, perfect. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Louis, for your moderation. Great. And Commissioner Regalado, thank you so very much for stepping up, calling the important conversation and bringing people together to think about the consequences of this proposal. And you have several of my leaders in the administration, several of my department directors here to get into the nitty gritty. And so I'll just quickly go over some of the areas that we tried to dissect in a memo that we put out this afternoon. And certainly we moved quickly to get this information to the public. If you haven't had a chance to see the memo, I would ask perhaps if it can be posted, or if you write us at mayor@miamidade.gov, we'll get you the copy right away. It was distributed, as I say, earlier today. But first of all, while we're all concerned about the homeless, we are definitely seeking places for people to live, the homeless to live, and we are in fact, a housing crisis, as I think we all realize. So definitely the intentions of creating more housing are very laudatory. That to be said, we have some serious questions and concerns about this particular proposal, and certainly about the location. So we've dissected this into social service considerations, whether this location would meet the needs of the homeless, whether the lack of close proximity to some of the essential services, the lack of access to ready transit, the isolation, some of these things really escalate some of the challenges that the homeless might face in getting the services that they need. Secondly, we address emergency evacuation, public safety considerations, and we have Pete Gomez, our Director of Office of Emergency Management, to speak more to the issues of evacuation and safety. As well, we all know this is a historically significant area. The beach, Virginia Key Beach and Park have been the subject of major community initiatives to restore and protect and preserve, and we want to be sure that's taken into consideration. There are significant infrastructure considerations, definitely the access to water, sewer, electricity, basic needs, environmental considerations as well. You heard about the fact that this is located adjacent to a property that we are looking for EEL or environmentally endangered land protection, as well as some of the habitat issues, the access to water issues and water purity and so on. And then finally, potential conflicts in the proposed use. So this property is part of the 1982 master plan, City of Miami, that has not been implemented. Definitely there are issues about the use of this land for park, which was part of the original purpose for the land and the conveyance to the city. So all of that is under review. And, should the city decide to go forward with this, obviously all of these issues have to be addressed. So that's my overview. And again, I just want to say thank you to Commissioner Regalado for acting swiftly, to reaching out to the different departments for input, and the experts are here to answer questions. I'm unfortunately not going to be able to stay on very long this evening, but I have my team there to respond, to listen, and certainly to work with the commission, the county commission, on a suitable solution. So thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity, and we're going to make sure that this is handled in a way that is sensitive to all the needs that have been expressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We appreciate you being with us tonight, and we appreciate your leadership on this. And I want to turn things over to Commissioner Regalado. This is in your district, and the mayor touched on so many of the reasons as to why this is not a viable option. But why is Virginia Key just the wrong choice for this? We all agree that we have to do something to help our homeless. No one is saying that. We're just looking at this site specifically and why this is probably not the best choice for this. Commissioner.
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, I want to welcome everyone and thank them for attending tonight's event. As Louis mentioned, the purpose of this is to provide some context. I think part of the problem here is that most people don't understand how the county participates in municipal decisions, right? So when the mayor speaks of water and sewer, of Durham, we're going to be talking about the EO properties, transit, emergency management. This is a property that is technically owned by the city of Miami, but as the mayor mentioned, it was given to the city by the county, and there are certain restrictions in terms of the use. So what we really want to do today is provide context, right, for what the city can do and what our concerns are, because we know that this has been a rushed issue, that the administration at the city of Miami is going to provide a memo with information to the commissioners. So a lot of our city partners are on, and we want to make sure that they hear from our perspective and they provide the city commission and the mayor with an informed decision. I also want to thank our departments. As the mayor mentioned, they moved very swiftly when we called them to talk about this issue. And there's also the mayor and elected officials from Key Biscayne that are on this call also, and I want to thank them for their advocacy. So Louis, like you mentioned, for those of us that are native Miamians, this place is near and dear, and we're very aware of the environmental issues. And I've said publicly that while we absolutely support the efforts to build options for our homeless population, Virginia Key is 100% the wrong location. And that's what we're going to be flushing out today. At the Board of County Commissioners, we talk about a no and a soft no. So I just want to be on the record as a hell no for this, even if that means bringing an item before the Board of County Commissioners and moving forward on the reverter clause for this property. That's how strongly I feel about this as a representative for the area. The county has invested, and the city of Miami has invested so much in Virginia Key, and we need to preserve it. So, the mayor mentioned the infrastructure issue. As many of you know, I feel strongly about septic tanks and the need to invest in infrastructure. So you're going to hear a lot about that and how that's important for our water quality and our one water system. But today, a lot of what you'll hear will be about the environment, and that's what we want folks to focus on. We will find a solution for the homeless issue for the city of Miami. I represent them the same way I represent Key Biscayne, and I'm committed to working with them on a solution, but we just want them to be informed on while this would be difficult, if not impossible, and I just want to be on the record that I will push for litigation if that's the case. It's not the first time I've sued the city of Miami, and I hope we don't get to that point, but I just want everyone to know just how firmly I feel about it. And finally, we're not going to cover absolutely everything. So email us at the end if you have questions, and we will be putting this video out. So thank you, Louis, for everything that you've done and for your love and protection of Virginia Key also.
My pleasure. And, Commissioner, it's so important that we all take a breath, right? We take a beat to really just dissect this issue and look at why this probably is not going to work. And we have assembled for you tonight an esteemed panel of experts in each of their fields that are going to help us unpack all of this. A lot to unpack, right? We begin with Roy Coley, Director of Miami-Dade Water and Sewer. We also have Jose Enrique Cueto, Deputy Director of Miami-Dade Department of Transportation and Public Works. With us tonight also, we have Carlos Hernandez, Division Chief with Miami-Dade County Department of Regulatory and Economic Resources, RAR DERM. And finally, Pete Gomez, Assistant Director of the Office of Emergency Management. So, let's start off with the environmental impact. That's why so many of us are here. We're talking about Virginia Key. There has never been any residences on Virginia Key. There's never been any residential infrastructure on Virginia Key. We talked about this being environmentally sensitive land next to a land that the county wants to acquire for the EEL program. So let's talk about just the permitting process, right? So why don't we give this to Carlos and to Roy and talk to us about the hurdles that the city is probably going to have to overcome in order just to get the basic permitting to create this camp. Carlos, let's start with you.
Sure. Good evening. This is again Carlos Hernandez with DERM. Pleasure to be here with everyone today. And so like any project, whether it's a short-term project, long-term project, DERM will be activated in the process of reviewing any development. And so in that process, all the work that's proposed, not only the final product, but we will look at also the iterations to get there, right? So there's a lot of planning that occurs up front. There's a lot during the construction phase, there's impacts as well. So there's a lot of parts to this, moving parts to it that get reviewed by DERM to make sure that there isn't impact. So if it was mentioned, there's numerous sensitive environmental receptors in the area. There's critical habitats, significant tree resources. I think it was mentioned the acquisition for eels, and just in general, the county over the years has spent millions of dollars on restoration projects out here, addressing some of the contamination issues and other factors on Virginia Key in this area in general. And so when you look at the area that we're discussing, it's almost like a little donut hole, right? It's a little piece that appears to have no impact on those environmental receptors or those critical habitats, but everything around it, with the exception of immediately to the west, which is the wastewater treatment plant, are very sensitive. The surface water bodies, the wetlands of regional impact, the tree resources. And so we would look at it, the plans themselves would come in through DERM early on in the process. We would look at it and make sure all the experts within DERM, we have numerous divisions that would look at this, ranging from our plan review division, natural resource division, infrastructure divisions as well. We'll look at it to make sure that what is proposed will not have an impact. And I think you can't overlook the fact that while the work itself might happen in this little space that doesn't appear to have those critical resources, all around it you do. And so it's really important to look at the construction traffic that would occur, the vehicle traffic associated with trucks coming in and out depending on the scope of the construction. So all those things we would look at it from runoff, where's parking going to occur, are there going to be stormwater impacts? And then, of course, we have to look at the potential for the fact that there may be some solid waste in the area. Over the years, there's been some buried solid waste in the areas. We'd have to look at potential contamination issues and what the development itself would have an impact on that, and potentially disturbing some areas within that area that doesn't appear to have those resources, but beyond the resources, right? So, for example, during construction, you could have significant sediment runoff that would impact those wetlands and also surface water bodies where we have critical habitat of Johnson grass and the like. And so it's really critical to look at beyond the immediate scope of that footprint and look beyond that, because there could be impacts. And so the DERM review process, again, being processed and reviewed by all the experts at DERM, we'll look at that. We'll look at the immediate footprint and the footprint beyond that. And so we would want to make sure that that those resources are not impacted. So that would be it's sort of a lengthy process, right? And a really critical one, and one that can't be overlooked. The other aspect of it is, from our infrastructure side of it, we would definitely look at from a perspective of potable water and sewage. Those are really critical elements. And I know Roy probably talk a little more about that, but that's something that DERM looks at very carefully. And this area has really limited capability of bringing in water and sewer. And so, but beyond that, how do you get water and sewer lines there if you wanted to bring them there? And so are you going to traverse other areas that are also sensitive? So again, going beyond the immediate footprint is really important for us to look at. We would look at that as well. And then at the point of looking at those resources, one option that would probably be considered, we'd look at it very carefully, is, they would probably propose septic tanks, something we would, we generally oppose, and would be very concerned to have here in an area that is very near those environmentally sensitive resources, and also in an area that's a coastal A zone. And so that's a really critical part, that while we may not have as Durham the jurisdiction over the floodplain aspects of it, because that's typically done by the municipality, we will look at it from a perspective. If there's a proposal to go with a septic system, we will definitely look at that, in the sense that that entire area is a coastal A zone. And for those that may not know what a coastal A zone is, it's an area that is immediately next or adjacent to a high velocity zone, which that means that if there's a large event, there's a really good chance of significant wave action, right? So having a drain field in this area would be a really bad idea, and something that would be a great concern, which then drives the need to bring in infrastructure. And how does that infrastructure get there? And does it have to traverse sensitive lands? So just in short, it's a significant review process that has to go through the entire department, all the experts to look at it, and make sure that all those sensitive resources, surrounding this area are protected and not impacted.
Yeah, the idea of bringing septics is just mind-boggling. We're trying to get rid of our septics, and Key Biscayne already got rid of theirs. To bring them back would be, it would not make sense. But the infrastructure is a huge issue right here. So I want to bring in Roy into the discussion. Mr. Cooley, what would it take to bring infrastructure to this area of Virginia Key?
I'm Roy Coley. I'm the director of Miami-Dade County Water and Sewer. We took a preliminary look at that. And without having any exact plans, what we can say to you is there's no wastewater infrastructure in this area. We do have a wastewater plant very close nearby, but all of the pipes coming into that plant are pressurized force mains pumping from the city of Miami and Fisher Island and the like. And so a sewer system would have to be built there, and a pumping station that would then pump it into the wastewater treatment plant. About 2,400 feet of piping, we estimate, in a pumping station. We could be talking about $2 to $3 million is what it would take to build the infrastructure for those proposed 100 mini homes.
That's an astronomical number. If anybody else wants to jump in and chime in before we move on to the next topic, I'd certainly welcome your comments. All right, let's move on. Carlos, you talked about this being a coastal A zone, and you touched upon that, but obviously this is at risk for flooding, especially if we have a major event. But given climate change and rising seas and the resiliency that we're all dealing with as a city, as a county, as a state, as a planet right now, shouldn't that also factor into whether or not we should move forward with this?
Absolutely. It's the expectation is it's not going to get better, right, immediately. And so it being a coastal A zone, which means it's very near a high velocity zone, just a difference of almost 1.5 foot difference to make it a V zone, which is really the most impactful area relative to floodplain management. And so sea level rise will only complicate this further, right? So from a longer term perspective, that is a significant concern and something that has to be reviewed and should be considered. And again, going back to, I hate to go back to the septic tank issue, but it's so related. All these things kind of impact each other, right? So Roy made a point of the significant investment that would have to be made to bring in infrastructure there for water and sewer, because it doesn't exist. And I had looked at it as well. So I agree with Roy on that completely. And so, you have to bring in that infrastructure, which could impact other resources. But then what will typically happen when, there's that significant cost, then the project developers will want to bring in septic. And I think septic is just a bad idea for this area. We've looked at other projects, with the city of Miami that they looked at in this area. And I think we've collectively decided not to go with septic in this general area for other projects that we've looked at more recently. So sea level rise is not going to make that an easier process. So it's a big concern, and only going to become a greater concern over time. So I'm glad you mentioned it. It's a great point that has to be considered.
That's a huge hurdle right there. But go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna thank Carlos for clarifying that and for explaining that, you know, what we always want is infrastructure, water and sewer, but the alternative to that is septic tanks. I was the commissioner that brought the moratorium on septic tanks for county-owned properties. We have issues with septic tanks that are leaking, and they are the large part of our issues with Biscayne Bay, right? So the idea of adding more septic tanks, like you mentioned, when we're trying to get rid of them, let alone in an area that is as environmentally fragile as this, is a horrible idea. So we're just explaining it so that folks understand the process that the city would go through when applying for these permits. But I think we can all agree that the last thing we want is septic tanks and runoffs. And obviously that changes the decision that the city has to make in terms of this being a plug and play site, which is one of the points that we wanted to make when talking to them about infrastructure.
This will not be easy. That is for sure. And another thing that has come up, obviously, in conversation and discussion is Virginia Key is, for the most part, a very remote area. Yeah, where it's in the middle of a bustling highway, the Rickenbacker Causeway, that connects Virginia Key to Key Biscayne, that connects us to the city of Miami. But there is nothing there as far as grocery stores and basic services, and there's barely any transportation that goes through that area. So let's bring in right now Jose Enrique Cueto from the Department of Transportation and Public Works. Talk to us about the challenges for public transportation in this area, and how would we even begin to get these people mobile? They don't have cars, obviously, so how would they even begin to go to the stores or go about their day? And the camp, they'll be free to come and go from the way that the Commissioner Carollo described it, but where would they go and how would they get there? That's a big issue.
Louis, thank you, and that's absolutely correct. Miami-Dade has transit service along the Rickenbacker Causeway. However, the nearest available bus route is Route B, which is nearly 2 miles away from the proposed site, with the most proximate bus stop being located at Mast Academy. So there's a significant distance, as you were noting, for users to travel to access transportation options. Therefore, any development in this area would require a detailed engineering and technical analysis, along with coordination with the property owner, in this case, the city of Miami, to identify what appropriate mobility solutions might look like. And we also would need more detailed information, of course, beyond what's available at this time, to identify what those solutions are. But it is a challenge. There's not anything immediately available today or viable to move people from the proposed location out towards our transit options and into where services and other needs are available to them.
And what would it mean to actually increase service to that area? How much would it cost, and is that even viable?
We don't have, we haven't analyzed it, Louis, so it would be hard to say, but it would likely require, a circulator or other mobility options. We do have bike lanes along the Rickenbacker, as most people know, so that is an option potentially. But to provide a number or a cost estimate at this time would be premature. We just don't have enough information as to what the proposal or the development might look like.
Can we talk about safety for a second? I don't know if we have someone on the panel that could address this also, but we do have Mast Academy that is on Virginia Key, that is very, very close to where the proposed camp is, and closer even to Mast Academy, we have AMI Kids, which is a camp that actually addresses troubled youth. And there are children there, and there are certain laws that dictate who can live next to a place where kids congregate. Does anybody want to take up that subject and talk about the challenges that this might pose in having this proposed homeless camp next to a high school and next to a place where other teenagers go that are, of that very vulnerable age that need to be protected?
Well, Louis, we have Ron Book representing the Homeless Trust that is on. If he wants to tackle that piece, we can add him to the panel. But I can also tell you, as the former school board member that represented the area, obviously, there are requirements in terms of sex offenders. So there would have to be a screening that would ensure that the folks that are this near to a school are not registered sex offenders. So that adds a whole other dynamic. And there's Mr. Book.
Mr. Book, do you want to take this up?
Louis,
Welcome
thank you very much. Briefly, and I'm joined by our executive director. For those that don't know, I'm chairman of the Miami-Dade County Homeless Trust. First of all, you would end up having to screen out, and we do screen for shelter purposes, but also for housing purposes and where people can live. predators and offenders who cannot live within 2,500 feet of a school or park, playground, and the like. Number one. Number two, I certainly want to share with folks, Homeless Trust thinks a true tiny home pilot project that, if you will, is a housing first model has merit, but it needs to be placed in a location in our community that is community compatible and community friendly. If what you end up doing is putting a project together in a location like this, where the tiny homes cost you $8 to $12 million, and then your infrastructure is another 3, 4, 5, with all of the other attendant issues, got to be a better location. We've repeatedly said that the trust is not in the business of helping to locate a particular housing first development like the tiny home proposal, but it needs to be in a community compatible place. And then secondly, or thirdly, I should add the following. And we weren't talked to, it was not discussed with us before the proposal came before the commission. We've been extremely clear. An encampment, which is tents or sheds or a warehousing of homeless people, endangers the $41 million partnership we have with the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. You put a program together that is an encampment, and I don't care whether it's tents or it's sheds. Sheds are not tiny homes. Tiny homes are legitimate housing dwellings that have a small kitchen, have hot and cold running water, and the like. They are not a place where there's some communal kitchen in the middle of the development for folks to go and cook and or to shower. That's not a true tiny home development. And it is certainly not conducive to case management and wraparound services. And so in the totality of things, whether you're talking about the sexual predator issue, that is certainly an issue, look at the other issues of engagement.
Ron, can I interrupt you for 1 second? Just
yes,
because you hit on something that came up during commission meeting, and that is providing services to the people living in this proposed tiny camp. How would you even begin to bring services to them? We're talking about having mobile offices there and bringing people in from the Homeless Trust and other people that provide services regularly to this sector of our population. Is that even feasible? How would they be, in downtown Miami and then make time in their day to travel down to Virginia Key and make themselves available? Do you even have the manpower for that? And how is that even going to be
in the conversations that we've had with both Commissioner Regalado and the mayor's office on that issue, Housing First, Louis, is a low barrier entry program where you provide housing for someone, whether it's transitional or permanent, and they're provided in the Housing First model with a case manager who works that individual into ultimately accepting our services. They don't come in with an understanding they're going to take mental health, substance abuse, alcohol abuse services from us. It is unconditional entry into the housing development, and then the case management works it. The answer is we would work with the city to try to provide services, but it needs to be a community compatible location where you can legitimately provide that wraparound services. Otherwise, it's not Housing First. And if it's not Housing First, I can tell you our experience just under 10 years ago, HUD punished Miami-Dade County. We've got the best continuum of care in America. HUD has recognized us as that. But yet they didn't think we were moving as aggressively as we should have in providing more Housing First units. And then they took $6 million away from us. And that was during a period of time that Congressman Diaz-Bart was even chairman of the subcommittee. We ultimately got some of it back, but we cannot afford to compromise our position with our partners at HUD. They provide us with $41 million each and every year for our programs. If we lose that money, we don't have money to replace it. And that means you start closing programs and putting people back out on the streets. We're in the business of ending homelessness, not creating it. We cannot afford to take those risks.
And that is in fact a huge risk. Is this something that they would even embrace? We talked about this being a voluntary encampment where it would be proposed to those who are rounded up, for lack of a better word, and said, would you like to come to this camp? I mean, two very impassioned homeless women got up and spoke at the commission meeting on Thursday night. I don't know if people were tuned in because we thought at the beginning this was already resolved, and it was brought back by Commissioner De La Portilla. All of a sudden, when it came back, we had two homeless women that were still in City Hall who got up and spoke, and both of them emphatically said they do not want this. First of all, in order to be a part of this camp, they can't drink, they can't do drugs, and they were very honest, very transparent. And they said, this is part of our culture. Drugs and alcohol are probably why we're on the street right now. And I can tell you right now, we're not going to give up our drugs and alcohol to be a part of this camp. So how viable is that part of this equation?
Look, I think in fairness, you can make a housing first model work in many places. The problem is that we've yet to meet with the city. We have had to reach out in an attempt to try to meet with them so we could understand better what this so-called Diaz de la Portilla compromise was for tiny homes. We've heard two versions. If it's simply bringing sheds to the property, you cannot make that work. I don't care where it is, you can't make it work, and it endangers our funding. If, again, you gotta be in a place in Miami-Dade County where it's community compatible. You cannot create an atmosphere where homeless individuals who are coming into housing, getting off of the streets, most of them, the largest percentage of which are chronic. Look, I'm doing this 27 years. We know who's still out there. We know what successes we've had. These are the toughest to place individuals. They're shelter resistant. If they're in an unwelcome place in the community, it doesn't work. It needs community embracement. That is not this location.
Louis, just
Go ahead, Commissioner.
yeah, thank you. But just to chime in on something that Ron said that I think is really important, because watching the chat, I think there's some confusion. This item, when it first came before the city, that meeting, the original item was exclusively this location. It was voted down, and then a few hours later, the item came up again, and the item that was passed considers this location and others. So it's important for folks to understand that in part while we're doing this is that we want to provide the city with information on how this location will be very difficult, if not impossible, and what our position is. We are working with the city on other locations, and we want to support them in their pilot for tiny homes. But as Ron said, we have to work within the existing services and make sure that this project does not take away from other projects or somehow threaten the funding that we are receiving for our current homeless population. It's also important, if folks want to look into this, there's the Lifeman project that's been delayed for many years that was supposed to take care of the chronically homeless. And we've been dealing with that at the county. And I know that the mayor is committed to moving that project forward and getting it online. So there's other things that have been in the work for this population for some time.
100%. And that was the charge. Go ahead, Mr. Book.
I would simply add, following up on Commissioner Regalado's comments, look, you've got the director of water and sewer. You got the director of Durham. You got the director of transportation and public works. All three basically telling you you've got insurmountable, if you will, mountains
Hurdles
on Virginia Key. Because let's be clear, we don't have any mountains in our community. You got mountains to climb before they're ever going to permit this project, and their permitting is required. And I can tell you that while, Louis, you are quite right, the vast majority of homeless folks do not have vehicles. Some do. That too creates a set of issues. But if you don't have transit, if you don't have transportation where people can move around, because many homeless people, remember, do have employment of some kind, and you're certainly working to get them to employment. If you don't have all of those essential pieces, you can't make the site work.
Let's not forget, they call this a transition zone. So the whole purpose behind this encampment is to transition the homeless into a home. And so it seems like you said, there are insurmountable mountains that the city will have to overcome in order to make this a viable transition zone. But there's also, I want to bring in Pete Gomez into this conversation as well, because there's also some major safety issues that come along with this. And that is, as we were talking before about there being this being a high coastal flooding area, and the effects of climate change and rising sea levels, and obviously extreme heat. What would happen if we had a major event in this area, and how would the Office of Emergency Management even begin to respond to this? Pete, I'm curious to get your insight on this.
Right, and Louis, thank you for having us on, and I want to thank Commissioner Regalado for taking on this hot topic issue, and thank the mayor for allowing us to participate. But those are my concerns right away, Louis. When I heard about this, is from the emergency management perspective, we kind of like touch on all the subjects that everybody else has mentioned, Mr. Book, Mr. Hernandez, Roy. All those things affect us, and right away I started thinking about what are we going to do with this population that we are putting in an evacuation zone, zone A, which is the first people that we're going to evacuate when any type of hurricane is heading our way, right? And zone A is going to be severely impacted. Just when I say just a Category 1 hurricane, and we could see up to 6 from between 3 and 6 foot of inundation levels there that is going to be created, by the storm surge that's being brought up on that area. So Mr. Book and others have mentioned the fact that they're not going to have, or the transportation is going to be impacted or severely limited to these folks. It's how are we going to get them off that island? How are we going to get them out? And if we have to evacuate them, how are they going to get themselves out? But there's a lot more, and Mr. Book kind of touched on it from the emergency management perspective and public safety is, these tiny homes are going to have, if they are indeed true tiny homes, where they're going to have kitchens and they're going to have electricity, they're going to have all those things, that brings, the potential for fire, right? And, the water supply out there to be able to get, fire trucks pumping water to these homes is very limited out there. As a matter of fact, I'll go on a limb and say, your fire hydrants are inadequate to support any kind of like that. I can't speak for the fire department in the city of Miami, but I'm sure that's going to have to be looked at immediately before they can proceed. So what is the question? Are they going to create and build a fire station out there with a some sort of pumping apparatus, and then we look into EMS, right? Rescues. Are we going to have a rescue out there? Because the nearest fire station is on Southwest 2nd Avenue and 10th Street, and that's an incredible length of time, to meet the standards that are set. And the city of Miami is one of the best in the country when it comes to response times. That's going to severely affect their response time out there. And then Louis, we got to take it, into account all the other things, like Mr. Book said. How are we going to get them medical attention out there? How are we going to get them food? How are they going to get themselves food? How are they going to transport out there? So those are all, effects that I think are important that need to be addressed. But, the fact that we're putting them out there, we're putting them at risk for events such as hurricanes. And we all know we live in Hurricane Alley. We're getting more events. They're coming in stronger. The intensity is stronger because of the climate change. And I think it would be a detrimental effect, to that community by putting them out there in that location.
Yeah, it's certainly, the more we speak about this, the more insurmountable these mountains seem to be. Commissioner, piggybacking on what you said earlier about how this came back during that commission meeting, and Mr. De La Portilla brought it back, and it wasn't just Virginia Key that was going to be studied, but the charge to staff, city staff members, was to come back with 2 other viable options. Commissioner, you and I spoke, was it yesterday, the day before? The days all meld together on this, and we had another spirited conversation. You said you were actively working with the city to identify other possible locations, other possible sites. How is that process going, and have we identified those other possible sites? And are they all in the city of Miami, or can they be also on the county side, outside the city boundary?
Yes, so currently we are working with the city. We're going to be meeting with them next week. They have identified some sites within the city of Miami, but they also want us to consider sites outside of the city of Miami. We're also talking with them about other issues that they have raised related to homelessness. For example, policing issues in terms of drop off of homeless individuals that have been arrested when they leave TGK. So we really uh, gotten a whole list of complaints really from them as to what brought us to this point. But we wanted to provide them with an overview from our departments because, you know, it's important, Louis, that people understand. Normally you have to submit a permit in order to get this feedback, right? So we're just doing it ahead of time to present our position to the cities so that they can consider that when they make their decision. One of the concerns that we've gotten from so many folks is that they think that the city can already start this work and that they're going to roll up Airstreams or mini houses, you know, in the next few days and open, you know, this site. That's not the case. There's a lot of things that have to happen before that occurs, and they're going to come back with a report in September. So they haven't made a decision on a site, and that's why we wanted to educate everyone on why this site is a no-go, so that they can consider this for the other sites. And again, in the same way that we're making our staff available for some opinions on this site, we'd be happy. I've told the city that we'll do the same for the other site so that they can make an informed opinion and we can all save some time. And I know that Ron has also reached out to them. So we're actively working with the city so that when that report goes to the city commission in September, it has all the information and we can move forward with them to make this pilot happen somewhere else.
Are we able to share where some of the other sites that are being considered are right now, or it's still very much in the preliminary stage?
Yeah, it's still very preliminary.
Okay, we want to open this up right now. I know we have a lot of people. I think over 200 people that are tuning in right now. That shows you how much we love our this shared backyard. As I said, it's a very special part of Miami. Speaking with the Virginia Key Outdoor Center, you know, it's described as the heart and soul of Miami, and it certainly is that. Those of us who spent time there know how special this piece of land is. So we have so many people here that are very, very concerned. I want to take some questions right now from those who are watching. If you'll forgive me and indulge me once I put my glasses on because I can't see without it. This is Sue. I'm sorry if I mispronounced her name, Kawalerski, and she asked, what are the specific restrictions placed on this site when the county gave the city the property? So going back to when Virginia Key was deeded over the city of Miami, what were the restrictions that were put in place that prevents the city from actually doing what they want with this parcel of land? Can you answer that, Commissioner?
Yes, it's a use restriction. It's for recreational use. That's why one of the things that you heard the city commission mention is that this pilot would be temporary housing, not permanent housing, because they couldn't have, you know, residential. But just so that you know, also, in order for the city to build residential facilities here, they would have to change the zoning and their land use plans, right? Because not only is there a deed restriction, but they have their own zoning restrictions here, which is why one of the things that they've mentioned is that these tiny homes would be on wheels or they would be mobile, right? And that way they would circumvent the permanent residential. But you get into a very gray area because, as Carlos mentioned and as Roy mentioned, you know, tiny homes have kitchens, they have bathrooms, right? They hook up, they need electricity. That's where we would get into some details in terms of the permit and what is temporary, but the restriction is it must be used for recreational. Also, it's important to note that the city has a no net loss criteria for recreational spaces. So that would require them to replace this recreational land for somewhere else within the city limits. So they have their own zoning and planning hurdles that they would have to go through in order to move this forward beyond the county's objections.
What kind of feedback have you been getting from the city since this, you know, obviously it's very fresh. It's only a week old. I know you've been in conversations with Commissioner Carollo. Are they open to having these conversations, and are they open to, are they seeing the light, so to speak? And maybe they rushed to choosing or identifying Virginia Key as the site for this proposed camp?
They've been very receptive to the conversations. I don't think as a group, politicians are uh, open to admitting, right, that they rushed to anything. I think they've kept it like, we were considering all sites and this was just one of the sites. That's what they eventually passed. So that's where they're at. And that's why we offer to provide them with input, not just on this site, but on the other sites also, so that we're clear that we want this project to succeed wherever they do it, but we want to ensure that it complies with the county requirements, but that it also fits within the homeless trust paradigm, and it doesn't impact our housing priorities and funding at the federal level.
Well, I think this is a very productive conversation that we all had today. We really dissected all, themes that have come up since this proposal was given air last Thursday during the Miami City Commission meeting. We talked about infrastructure problems. We talked about transportation problems. We talked about services. We talked about emergency management and how we get the people the help that they need should a catastrophic event reach that. We talked about other safety concerns as well. I think that a lot of us are feeling a lot better about the process right now and knowing that there is an active search to find other viable sites for this. It was so important for all of us to sit down today and just kind of dissect this, masticate this, and actually, bring the insight and the information to the members of our community who are so concerned about this. I know that my Instagram, my social media has been blowing up ever since this happened, especially after the report that we ran last night. Glenn Milberg, my colleague, another exceptional report that ran tonight. If you missed it, 6 o'clock, please go to our website, local10.com. And I think we could all, take a breath and take a beat back and realize that we're all working together. We all know that we have a homeless crisis in our backyard, and as I say, in Miami-Dade County, we're all connected. My problem is your problem. And the water connects all of us. It's not just Virginia Key. This is going to impact Biscayne Bay. This is going to impact our quality of life. And it's incumbent on all of us to actually stand up and find a solution to this problem. I think that's what we did tonight, is move that ball in that direction. So I want to thank our esteemed panelists, beginning with our host for this evening, Commissioner Regalado, for actually making this happen, and our esteemed County Mayor, Diana Levine Cava, Roy Coley from WASD, Jose Enrique Cueto from the Department of Transportation and Public Works, Carlos Hernandez from RER Durham, and of course, Pete Gomez from the Office of Emergency Management. Mr. Book, thank you again from the Homeless Trust. I think we can feel a lot better after actually, parsing this and dissecting this and realizing, how challenging this would be if this were to move to the next level of conversation. Correct, Commissioner?
Yes, correct. And that's why we wanted to do this today. And I want to thank everyone also for their time and their commitment to informing the public on this. A lot of folks thought that once the city of Miami voted, it was a fait accompli, and that is not the case. There is a process. We're working with them to find them other sites. And tonight is just the beginning of that conversation. So we're going to keep working with them because there is a human side. And you're right, on the homeless issue, as their representative, I'm committed to helping them, find a location and deal with the challenges that they have. However, we just wanted to be clear, that Virginia Key is not a good site and what the hurdles would be for them to even consider that a site in terms of getting this project going. But Louis, I also want to thank you for your commitment to this, to Virginia Key, to our environment. You've been wonderful. And I also think that there's a silver lining to this, right? I think it started a conversation about the fragility of Virginia Key, about the environmental importance of Virginia Key. And for those of us, like you mentioned, that were born and raised here, we know that. But, when we were dealing with the Rickenbacker and that process, one of the things that we wanted was for the city to finally tell us what their plans were for Virginia Key, if they were going to go forward with the master plan, what are they doing? So I hope that as a result of this, we'll have more of that information and we can work in partnership to preserve it and to keep it the beautiful, wonderful center of our environmental recreation in Miami-Dade County.
And we also shine the spotlight on our homeless crisis. And that's important that we all take a step back and realize that we do have a problem here. And there are people out there, our brothers or sisters or neighbors, that need our help and that deserve our help. And we should all, be involved in finding active solutions to solve this problem. So It was a good, I think you're right. I think we should look at the silver lining and look at the spotlights being shined right now on Virginia Key, on the challenges that our environment, that our bay is facing, that our natural world is facing, and that our community is facing right now. So everything in the positive, right? Keep things in the positive light. Let's move forward and let's find solutions to these very pressing issues that we're all facing. Those of us who call Miami-Dade County home.
Thank you. I think Roy has his hand up, Louis. So I don't know if Roy wanted to say something.
What? Yep. So final
Yeah,
thoughts, Roy?
Louis had two things that I wanted to share. In the chat, there's a recurring question about the visibility of some electrical contractors working in the area and some people concerned that maybe that's what's going on. What I wanted to say about that was at the Central District wastewater plant, we have a number of improvement projects underway, and we have a number of electricians working at the plant site for us. Has nothing to do with this. I suspect that's probably what is being seen and shouldn't be an alarm that they see an electrical contractor there. The other thing that I could share with you, the Mayor Cava dropped off, but she asked me to remind everybody that the county and all of its staff is committed to providing information, and that if anybody didn't get their questions asked and answered, to feel free to contact either her or any one of the staff. And if you contact the staff member that doesn't have the information, we have a no wrong door policy, and we'll get you to the right folks and get you your answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coley. Thank you, Roy. And thanks everybody for tuning in and spending your Thursday evening with us. I hope we answered your questions. I hope everybody's feeling a lot better about what's going on and realizing that our policymakers, our leaders are on this, and they are very, very protective of this parcel of land. I know you are, Commissioner Regalado. I know this means a lot to you. That's why you organized this.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
Have a great night, everybody.
Good night.